Hey, this is PJ Aubrey. Thanks for coming. I wanted to add a little personal message before I showed you this next podcast. Sometimes in production, things don't go in order. Sometimes authors write the last chapter first, filmmakers will film a scene in the middle of the movie before they film a scene at the beginning of the movie. And in the case of this podcast, it was the first one I ever made, even though it will be the fourth one that Survivor's Guide to Hell will publish. It's a little funny that way. I had so much fun listening to this podcast because I got to see exactly how much Survivor's Guide to Hell got to learn about podcasting in 4 short episodes. Thanks to supporters like James Armstrong and Family Howell Trust, we've gotten better equipment and we've gotten more experience. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the very first episode we ever made, even with its little quirks and mistakes. We've still got a lot to learn, but we're looking forward to doing that with you. And hey, thanks for showing up.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to A Survivor's Guide to Hell, the podcast. I'm Phoebe J. Aubrey, here to walk you through this pessimist-friendly guide to finding the silver lining. Each week we pick an unpleasant topic and share stories that will hopefully help you laugh, help you find a bright side, or even change your perspective on something. Thank you so much for listening. Today, our unpleasant topic is self-centered celebrities. This episode has a third act that includes Adam Sandler and Macklemore singing with a ton of puppets. Due to copyright reasons, this act can only be accessed via our blog. I invite you to check it out. You wouldn't want to miss watching Adam Sandler singing with Elmo and getting kissed by a giant plush dragon. Sometimes, when we think of celebrities, we think of their mugshots. We think of them throwing fits at award ceremonies, getting wasted with designer drugs, and on rare occasions, getting pushed to the ground after provoking a Syrian refugee. Maybe you haven't heard of that one? I assure you, it's happened. I don't really follow celebrities. I've never purchased a gossip mag or hung posters of famous faces in my room. I have wrinkled my nose a time or two at a tasteless celebrity stunt, and there's plenty of well-known names that curl my lip when I hear them in the news. Again. At times, these folks seem like unattainable forms of human life, demigods of decadence. But at their worst, they can often appear to be the lowest forms of hominid creation. Perhaps we're not giving these celebrities enough credit. Maybe stardom really is a curse that's difficult to bear with grace. Without their fame and fortune, I'd wager these people would be exactly like us, and with fame and fortune, we may very well be like them. I want to highlight a few celebs that remind us that these creatures are, in fact, human, and not a different breed of human, the same breathing, feeling, mistake-making type that we are. In today's podcast, you'll see a heartwarming biography that will make you think twice about what it means to have character. And you'll hear the little-known underdog story of a well-known actor. Without further ado, Act 1! It really is a wonderful life. Let's talk James Stewart. If you don't recognize his name, you may recognize his best-known movie title, It's a Wonderful Life. It was James Stewart responsible for saying this wonderfully random, romantic line.
What is it you want, Mary? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down. Hey, that's a pretty good idea. I'll give you the moon, Mary.
I'll take it. Then what?
Well, then you could swallow it. And it'd all dissolve, see? And the moonbeams would shoot out of your fingers and your toes and the ends of your hair. Am I talking too much?
According to the Jimmy Stewart Museum, James was a man of many hats. He graduated from Princeton with a degree in architecture, but with unemployment at Great Depression proportions, he ended up taking small gigs on Broadway instead. He started on Broadway with bit parts, moved to small parts, and those led to leading roles until he was discovered by Hollywood, the museum says. He signed a contract with MGM and spent the 1930s making over a dozen films. In the midst of an incredible movie career, Jimmy made a move that both surprised his fans and disappointed MGM. And no, it wasn't an overdose. Jimmy joined the army. The Jimmy Stewart Museum tells us more. The Stewart family tradition of serving in the military goes back to Jimmy's third great-grandfather, Fergus Moorhead, who served in the Revolutionary War. Jimmy's maternal grandfather was a general for the Union in the Civil War. His father, Alex, served in both the Spanish-American War and World War I. Jimmy Stewart entered the Army as a private, and at the end of World War II was a colonel in the Army Air Corps, fully decorated as the result of the 20 combat missions he flew over Germany as leader of a squadron of B-24s. Among the medals he was awarded were 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses and the Croix de Guerre. Stewart continued his military career after World War II by serving in the Air Force Reserves and rose to the rank of Brigadier General. President Reagan awarded him the Medal of Freedom, which is the highest award that can be awarded to a civilian in the United States. It was only after Jimmy returned from his service that he filmed It's a Wonderful Life. Surprisingly enough, the movie was a box office failure, but went on to become one of the most famous Christmas movies in history. What else impresses me about Jimmy Stewart? He only married one woman. He had twin daughters with her and helped raise her 2 sons, Michael and Ronald. Unfortunately, Ronald would be lost in the Vietnam War. Other little-known facts about Jimmy. He was a poet. The title came rather unintentionally after reciting some of his writing on The Johnny Carson Show, which spurred sales on his poetry book until it was a bestseller. His publication continues to do well a century after his birth. Jimmy died of cardiac arrest on July 2, 1997. Instead of leaving a trail of gossip-worthy antics, embarrassing paparazzi photos, and criminal activity, he left a brilliant example of serving country and family. When he passed, I bet James had thousands of people convinced that the next time a bell rang, it was good old Jimmy getting his wings.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right.
Our next story comes from none other than one of America's most celebrated celebrities, Jim Carrey. He's a 2-time Golden Globe winner with a thick stack of movie titles in his resume and a fan base to match. Jim's inflatable arm man energy was in his blood since he was a youth. According to IMDb, he was notoriously rambunctious. In junior high, he was granted a few precious minutes at the end of each school day, says IMDb, to do stand-up routines for his classmates, provided, of course, that he kept a lid on it for the rest of the day. When his family was forced to relocate to a Toronto suburb, growing up got a lot more complicated. Jim worked 8-hour shifts at Titan Wheels factory after school, and when his family eventually left the factory, they were forced to live out of a Volkswagen camper van. Finally, the time came where they could move their lives back to Toronto. It was then that Carrey began his debut as a stand-up comedian. But even with his family back on their feet, the future wasn't looking too bright for Jim's career. Jim tells this cringeworthy experience from his first performance at the Yuck Yuck Comedy Club. My mother dressed me in a polyester suit because that's how they dressed on the Dean Martin roast in the hippest part of Toronto, Jim said. I stood up there and I did this horrible, corny act. Halfway through it, they started playing the soundtrack of Jesus Christ Superstar, saying, "Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him." Mark got on the microphone backstage and went, "Totally boring, totally boring." I was 15. I got no leeway for that at all. It wasn't the only cruel reception standing between Carrey and the fame he'd later claim from major Hollywood movies. But perhaps it was trials like these that helped him become the kind of celebrity that waxes a little less irresponsible and a little more philosophical. In fact, he's been known to say a few thought-provoking lines, and not the kind that someone else wrote for him. I think everybody should get rich and famous, he once said, and do everything they ever dreamed of, so they could see that it's not the answer. He also stated,
I can tell you from experience, the effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is.
The list of insights goes on. In fact, after hearing enough of his personal quotes, I began to wonder if we were missing the best parts of Jim Carrey when we only watched him act. I invite you to get to know his real side a little better. For a video on what Jim Carrey is like away from the Hollywood cameras, please visit our blog. That is the end of today's stories. Now we invite you to join us for our weekly Silver Liners Challenge, which is designed to be an easy, actionable step that you can take to boost your week and help you survive hell. Here it is, the Silver Liners Challenge. Do you have a bit of a judgy habit? Are you feeling critical about that person that cut you off, that celebrity that just made a fool of themselves, or that stranger you just saw in a mugshot? Don't worry. Everyone has a judgy habit. But if you want to be a little less condemning of humankind, try this thought exercise the next time you feel judgmental. Ask yourself this: if my flaws were as public as this person's mistake, what would I want others to think about me? Feel free to share your answers in the comments of our website, www.survivorsguidetohell.com, or on our Facebook page. This is a podcast version of our sister production, A Survivor's Guide to Hell, the blog. This podcast gives you a way to access our content when you're driving, cleaning house, or practicing your puppetry. But if you'd like to see the videos and pictures that often accompany our posts, like Macklemore rapping with a bunch of grouches, check out our website, again, at www.survivorsguidetohell.com, where you'll also have much more information, including our storytelling code of ethics and information on how to submit your own story. We'd like to thank Zapsplat for some of this week's audio, as well as the Jimmy Stewart Museum and IMDb for their content. We're on a budget, and are currently using the recording equipment we already had laying around, plus a homemade mic filter made out of the lid of a peanut container. If you're interested in higher quality recordings, please visit the support portion of our site and see what you can do to help us out. Last but not least, our cheesy joke of the week. I was recently asked who my favorite vampire was. I said, the Muppet from Sesame Street. They told me he doesn't count. I replied, I assure you, he does. Thank you, and see you next Monday.